Hello and welcome to Cinemaholics, where we review the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. One of us is a film critic, one is a casual moviegoer, and the third person is me, your host John Negroni from the Internet California. On the show today, from the Internet Pennsylvania, he's a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he's our film critic. You can find his reviews on the playlist, Cutprint Film, Hey You Guys, Movie Boozer, and Your Expectations. It's Will Ashton.
Hello there.
Unfortunately, our casual moviegoer wasn't able to make it. It's partly my fault. It's a whole drama thing and scheduling issues and surprises and plot twists, and it's pretty exciting stuff, but we won't bore you with the details. Basically, Maverick Hines couldn't make it, sadly.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, he seemed pretty excited about this film, so we know he felt about the film, but we'll share that after we divulge how we feel about the film. So.
We have notes, and that film we're going to be talking about is Overlord from Paramount. So we'll get to that film in just a moment. That was picked by our patrons this week on our weekly poll on Patreon.
Yeah.
Thank you for choosing Overlord over The Grinch and The Girl in the Spider's Web. We are going to talk about The Grinch in many reviews.
I saw it.
Yep. We're going to talk about Widows. We're going to talk about Outlaw King, the front runner, maybe a couple more. But we didn't see The Girl in the Spider's Web. Will, you just weren't able to catch it? I didn't have time.
Yeah, no, I didn't have a screening for it, and I couldn't fit in this weekend. I don't know. I kind of want to see it because Fede Alvarez directed it, whom he's a director I am a pretty big fan of. I mean, he made the Evil Dead remake, and he made what was that movie called? Don't Sleep? What was it called?
Oh, Don't Breathe.
Don't Breathe. That
was a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good film. Well, I thought the Evil Dead remake was good too. So
it has its fans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm bummed that this film didn't quite catch the same fire, but I'll probably check it out on DVD or something someday. So.
Yeah, I might catch it in theaters if time permits. A lot of great films coming to theaters right now.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been tough. Yeah, I was supposed to see Bodied, and so many things are coming out. And toward the end of this episode, we'll be talking about what's on our radar for next week and how you can help us decide what's going to be covered. Of course, the big movie we're going to be talking about next week is Fantastic Beasts: Crimes of Grindelwald, but we'll be able to squeeze in some other films to talk about as well. As far as Girl in the Spider's Web goes, I'm looking at it now, and it's 44% on Rotten Tomatoes as of this recording. Only 53% audience score, so not looking super good, and I guess it is about as we expected. I mean, not from Fede Alvarez, but kind of just from the look and feel of the trailers with this, and yeah, this is kind of meeting my low expectations so far.
Yeah, I mean, they can't all be winners, so that's how it goes.
Yeah, that's true. So other than that, I was going to slightly tease that we have kind of a big announcement next week, so be sure to tune in for next week's episode. Even if you have no interest in Fantastic Beasts: Crimes of Grindelwald, we're going to be announcing something pretty exciting for the podcast I think is going to be pretty exciting going forward. I think people are going to dig the news, and but we're not going to do it this week. Just going to leave you all hanging. So apologies.
Yeah.
For that.
I mean, you can start your speculation, I guess.
That's right. Speaking of, thank you everyone who chimed in on the comments this week on our Bohemian Rhapsody episode. We got a lot of feedback for that review.
We did.
Really interesting feedback. A lot of differing opinions. That was a very contentious episode, as a lot of you might remember. We definitely, it was probably the most heated conversation we've had on this show. And the comments were pretty, I would say, pretty thoughtful, and I definitely appreciated like hearing lots of different perspectives on what ended up being a more controversial movie than I kind of expected.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy to hear from the listeners, but I'm glad that they were more civil than we were in their discussion of the film, so that's always a plus.
That's right. Yeah, I had fun though. It was like sibling civil, I guess.
Yeah.
It was a good conversation. It was a great episode. But okay, without further ado, let's get into our featured review of Overlord. This is a new wide release from Paramount. It's pretty interesting in that it's a genre-crossing movie. We don't get too many of those these days, kind of at this scale. But it combines the genres of World War II, kind of Band of Brothers, Saving Private Ryan, that sort of style. And that's really how Overlord starts out. But then along the way, we get into this kind of a grungy horror mad science motif, and the two genres kind of collide in some interesting ways. Now, this film was directed by Australian filmmaker Julius Avery. He did Son of a Gun, which I haven't seen. I also haven't seen any of his short films, but apparently they are quite good, and he's definitely made a splash with them before. And the screenplay and the main story, the story is from Billy Ray, who helped the screenplay along with Mark L. Smith. However, J.J. Abrams, of course, of Bad Robot fame, was heavily involved with this. Maybe, Will, you'll get into why maybe there was some Cloverfield speculation, what that might have meant. But this is not a Cloverfield movie. This isn't.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, there was that those rumors spreading around at one point, but as far as I can tell, this had no connection to Cloverfield.
Right.
Unless there was like some very, very hidden references, but I mean, they were way more overt in Paradox, Cloverfield Paradox, and it sounds like, from what I've heard, that they are just going to make a direct sequel next for the fourth Cloverfield film that's going to connect to the first film directly. So, yeah, it sounds like they're not really doing the anthology thing anymore, which is unfortunate. I was actually really excited about the idea of like a Twilight Zone for films with Paramount and J.J. Abrams involved, but alas, yeah, this just seems like its own little thing, but oh well.
Well, I think they'll still probably keep doing the anthology films. So, well, I wouldn't worry about getting your Clover fix anytime soon. I think that's still going to happen.
Hope so.
But yeah, so this premiered at Fantastic Fests. Reviews for it have been mostly positive across the board. And I have to say, I kind of joined the chorus of people who like this one. It definitely is right up my alley. And I was pretty surprised because remember we were watching the trailers months and months back. I was a little worried that it was advertising, or it was almost like over-promising in the advertising. And I was like, man, is this not going to be enough war? Is this not going to be enough Nazi zombies? You know, is it going to be one or the other? And it's kind of being deceptive. But this trailer really captures how even-handed the genres are here in a way that I think is interesting. The cast includes Yovan Adepo, Wyatt Russell, Pio Uzbek, John Magaro, and Mathilde Avier. I think that's how you say it, Matilda. She's French, and I apologize for butchering these pronunciations, but it's a great cast. And I know we were talking in the chat before about Wyatt Russell in this film. Will Ashton, you refer to him as Hollywood royalty.
Yeah, well, I mean, he is the son of Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, as you can probably guess from the name. So yeah, I like him a lot. He's one of my favorite things about this movie. He kind of plays against type because he's been, I think, since 22 Jump Street, kind of being thrown into like the stoner-ish type characters.
Yeah,
like,
Ingrid Goes West. You know, kind of. He's kind of a typical millennial character.
Yeah, there's that AMC show he's frontlining. I think called Lodge 47 or 49. I think
heard
it's
about
Lodge
this.
40.
Yeah.
I heard it's good, but I heard it's like kind of like Big Lebowski, so I kind of added to that whole like stonerish type of character he's been kind of typecast in. But so I like that this film played against type, and I thought he did very well in the part.
Yeah, he had a bigger role. I'm so used to him not having a big role in these movies. You know, you have like Everybody Wants Some, where he's obviously a very charismatic character in that.
Yeah,
he's nowhere. He's not
very much a stoner in that one.
Exactly. Yeah, he's not the main event in that one. But yes, and you know, one of these days we're gonna have to talk about Kate Hudson if we're talking about.
Well, that's
Goldie Hawn and Bill Hudson, but
yeah, I was gonna say that's not Kurt Russell, but yeah, that is
Wyatt Russell's sister. So
yeah, half sister, right?
Yeah.
But
so anyway, yeah. Now that we're out of Hollywood,
our episode of Cinemaholics talk about Hollywood royalty,
Hollywood Borgias, basically.
Yeah.
Let's start with Maverick Hines' review. He said he liked the movie. He gives it a B. He said he generally likes the pacing, but he doesn't love a character turn that involves, speaking of, Wyatt Russell's character in this movie. We won't spoil what that is or how it goes, but he had issues with the characterization, basically, and how that ultimately develops. But
yeah, he had a colorful way of describing that character too.
That's right. Yeah, we won't say it because we know there are young listeners of Cinemaholics. That's right. I want to keep it PG. But yeah, so he said he was, quote, really entertained by just a solid World War II thriller movie. Wanted a little more zombie out of it, though. Will Ashton, what do you think?
Oh, we're going to start with me. Yeah, I mean, I definitely enjoyed the trailer that you were talking about. It definitely hyped me up for a film that I'd heard about. I remember getting some buzz early on. I think in true Bad Robot fashion, they were keeping a lot their cards pretty close to their deck, pretty
Yeah.
close to their chest. I mean, we didn't know too much about it. Then the trailer came out. I was like, yeah, this looks cool. Like you said, it seemed like a nice blend of historical drama mixed with some genre elements. Kind of remind me a little bit of like Inglorious Bastards in a way, like something that kind of changed things up a bit, but kind of had a historical bend to it. And as far as that is concerned, I think it's pretty enjoyable. I mean, I enjoyed the cast. I think the gore effects are pretty good. I think it doesn't waste too much time getting into the action, as made evident by a fairly inspired opening scene,
Oh,
kind of a
yes.
Saving Private Ryan-esque type way of thrusting us into the story. But I wouldn't say the story left me wanting, but I never really felt like it matched my expectations. I don't know why exactly, and that's why I was kind of hoping to talk to you about it because I liked the film. I thought it was solid. I mean, I enjoyed it fine, but it kind of left me like, oh, okay, yeah, it was pretty good. Like I'm not quite on this hype train that everyone else is on. To be fair, I haven't really looked at too many reviews, so I haven't seen exactly what everyone's digging. I can probably guess it has to do maybe with some of the political elements of the film, but as it stands, I think it's solid. It's pretty well made. It's fine, but I don't think it really did anything I wasn't expecting. It kind of fell into the motions as far as the plot is concerned, and I thought I did well enough, but I don't think it's really going to make much of an impression on me ultimately.
It's interesting. I did read a bunch of reviews for this because I was curious, and I don't see a lot of that like virulent anti-Nazi-ness painting some of the reviews of like, wow, it's so cathartic.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm not saying that's the only reason why people are
Right. Yeah,
praising the
I
film.
wouldn't say from the reviews I've read, that's not really what I'm reading. I'm not reading like a because of this. I think that is certainly an element. It's a factor. I think that, but it all lends itself to what I think what's clicking for this movie with a lot of people is how satisfying it really is on all the levels it's reaching for. Most of the reviews that I've seen, I mean, nobody's calling this thing a masterpiece. Nobody's calling it something that's groundbreaking or revolutionary, but I think what people are really getting out of it is the smallness here and how it's a self-contained story. It's an original story. You say that it kind of goes by the motions, and I see what you're saying to an extent because it doesn't do anything that necessarily like rocks your expectations. There's no plot twist 2/3 in. It's actually very straightforward, right? It takes you on this journey. It kind of lays out its own rules, follows the rules, but then also does some I would say clever turns in how the story develops in terms of character conflicts and these soldiers who we should say, let's you mentioned the opening scene. It truly like, that was the moment when I realized I was actually watching a film that was going to be above my expectations because I went into this really expecting something far more middling in the production value. I wasn't expecting the effects and the direction to be so well realized. Honestly, I wasn't as familiar with Julius Avery, and I just think that the eye he had here was kind of remarkable. I mean, the scene, the tension, underplaying this, you likening it to Saving Private Ryan is kind of apt because that is a very gritty, intensifying scene, but it does its own thing. It's sort of trying to get across the brutality of war. Whereas this opening scene, which we follow our main character, Boyce, played by Giovanna Depo, you're really following, just this terrified human being really just being thrown into a war that he doesn't want to be in. And obviously that develops later on in some different ways. But for the purposes of this scene, his fright and terror in these circumstances is what's really carrying you through this scene from his perspective in a way that I thought it just really clicked for me. I think because this scene works so well, I was really on board for the whole thing. I was immediately sucked into it. And it doesn't even get into the horror elements until probably about 30 minutes in, if that. And then it becomes sort of like a Dirty Dozen, but with just a few men instead of 12 people, trying to do this what seems kind of like this small mission. They're just trying to take out a tower, but it turns into this big ordeal. And obviously, as we kind of mentioned, there's some weird shenanigans going on with Nazis doing experiments on people, and at the same time, the stakes couldn't be higher because, of course, if they take this tower down, the war, will be able to proceed. And all of this is going on, and a lot of things are going on. And I'll just say it had me from start to finish, and I don't think there was no moment in here where I was looking for more. There was nothing. There's no moment where I didn't feel satiated by this movie. It gave me everything that I felt like it was promising from beginning to end, and that includes the trailers. And I don't say that often. I usually am left either disappointed from the trailers, or the trailers didn't suck me in, and then I wasn't able to, watch the movie and get something out of it from there. I guess. Well, all I'm really saying is that this film to me was very compact and tight, and I have very little negative to say about it whatsoever, honestly. But okay, so let's get into some criticisms. Will let's start with like the story. You say it's kind of by the motions.
Yeah, it's a bit basic.
What did you think though of the horror elements of it? Because I mean, it certainly is a factor. But did you think it was clumsy at all in like balancing the genres?
Not necessarily. I mean, actually, I think that's one of the things I liked the most was how it
Great.
kind of infused. It never felt like, oh, now they're like they're now like Nazi zombies. It was just kind of like, okay, they work it in pretty well. I thought, if anything, the exposition at the beginning was a little clunky compared to the rest of the film, where I thought like the writing felt a little more even. And Billy Ray, is that the guy who wrote Shattered Glass?
I don't know.
I'm trying to remember. That name sounds familiar. I was trying to remember who that was. I'll have to look it up later. But yeah, no, I think for me, as far as the horror elements are concerned, I guess I was expecting the movie to be a lot gorier than it was. Not to say that it's not gory. I mean, it's fairly gory, but I guess compared to the trailer, I was like, oh, this movie is going to be like nasty. Like I thought it was going to be like really, really like gross and out there. And there are a couple stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
like they don't hold back per se, but yeah, I don't think it's like extreme as I expected. But I will say the effects are good, especially on there's a part of the film involving the main antagonist, and I guess it's in the poster, so it's not spoiler per se, but like it's like a big face wound.
Yeah.
I'm not quite. I think they might have had to do some CG for that. I don't know quite how they did that, but it looks
looked
really
practical.
cool.
Yeah, it was one of the highlights of the movie for me. And like when you say like the way that the plot develops and all of that, there were certain things concerning that character and sort of how things go down in this movie that I wasn't quite expecting. Like I won't say the movie ever really surprised me heavily, but I'll give it a lot of credit where I was just fully immersed enough that I wasn't thinking or trying to like think ahead, or I wasn't trying to like get ahead of this movie. And, I thought it was just the right amount of clever without being pretentious, I guess. And I know you hate that word, but that definitely in this case, it was not. So.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't ever say it's pretentious. I think it knows what it is, and I don't think it tries to overstep its boundaries. I think it's good. I don't know if I quite call it clever though. I don't know if there's anything in it that really like warrants that word for me, but I'm curious why.
Well, yeah. For me, the cleverness is in the staging. I do actually admire this screenplay a lot. I admire the structure of the acts because it is balanced so well, and the fact that the sense of location and atmosphere just go together really well. And I think it's clever to characterize these, I think it's clever to take these characters and to not give them super complicated backstories, and the way that they interplay, and then the way that, and I'm trying to step around spoilers here, so I apologize for the ambiguity, but there's a character conflict here between two of the main characters that I do actually think develops in a pretty clever way, in the way that it plays with the sense of location and, the difference between the tower and the lab. And I thought there was some light thematic touches here that it was just enough to be satisfying without it. It wasn't provocative, or it wasn't like thought provoking or anything like that, but I did find it, definitely like something I wasn't expecting. It was something there that they didn't have to put in, and they didn't have to put in all these extra touches. But I got that throughout this whole thing, where like the look of it was always very polished, and I thought it was coherent. Like there weren't huge gaps in logic. It wasn't like you mentioned Inglourious Bastards earlier, which is a movie that is totally like historically inconsistent. It's not trying to be historically accurate. But what I like about this film that sort of is playing around with the World War II era, is it actually kind of feels like the movie wants you to maybe think that this could have happened in some way, maybe less embellished.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that Inglourious Basterds, it's sort of revisionist history, but not to the extent where they go as far as Inglourious Basterds
Right.
does. Obviously, I mean,
I was about to
I won't
spoil that
elaborate
movie,
more
and
if you
yeah,
haven't,
yeah.
if the listener hasn't heard that. But yeah, no, I mean, like I agree with that. Like it is contained enough to where, like, I think if you read a history book, you'll know that this isn't true. But I mean, they make it feel authentic enough. Whereas,
Hmm.
like, if you I guess you could buy into this whole notion, I mean, because obviously the Nazis have done, horrible experiments on people, and this could feel like an extension of such. But yeah, it's interesting. I looked up. Yeah, Billy Ray is the guy that wrote and directed Shattered Glass, and he's also involved with Captain Phillips and State of Play, and he's been involved with a lot of really quality films. So I think that's a big credit to the film as far as the writing is concerned, that they got him on board. I did not expect that.
Yeah, and he's
Uh,
working on the next Terminators, or
yeah,
he's
and
helping with the script at least.
he's doing Ong Lee's next film as well, Gemini Man, with Will Smith, I believe.
Yeah, so definitely a very seasoned guy. I didn't know that
Yeah,
he
a
directed
veteran.
films though. A
Yeah, well, I
veteran,
mean,
yeah.
Shattered Glass and Breach,
Yeah.
and then that mediocre Secret in Their Eyes remake, I guess.
Hmm. I really don't have much to add to this. I just think that this is so what it is. There's nothing here to really overanalyze. There's nothing here to sort of, and maybe that's a negative, the film or something, where you could say, there's not much conversation to be had about it. I think maybe on a rewatch, you could have some fun with like how this sort of like lines up too with, the cinema's long history of Nazi zombies. It's been a long time, I think, since kind of that schlocky horror vibe came about. I think I don't know if you're aware of this, but the whole Nazi zombies thing was kind of resurrected, no pun intended. That's not even a pun, but you know what I mean. No joke intended, in the sense that the video game Call of Duty sort of brought back this sort of fascination with Nazi zombies. It became like this kind of cultural touch point.
Uh, yeah, when did that come out?
That was like back in 2008 or something like that,
I
maybe
was gonna say because
2009.
there are also the Dead Snow movies,
Hmm. Yeah.
which I'm a big fan of,
There's
and
Wolfenstein.
yeah,
There's like I said, like there is a lot of like Nazi zombie material out there, and you can sort of look at points where it sort of comes back in waves and renewed interest. And I think that's probably where Overlord kind of came in, sort of tapping back into this interesting thing that we could probably have a conversation about why Nazi zombies is a thing, and why Hollywood and video games and why we keep wanting to see stories about it. And we should be specific. It's not zombies in the sense of like, this isn't Dawn of the Dead. This isn't like anything like that.
or 28 Days Later either, I guess.
Right? Yeah. It's nothing like that. We're just sort of being a little fast and loose with the term zombie, I
Well,
guess.
yeah, I mean, like they're technically zombies, but not like traditional
Right.
zombies. So yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a solid flick. I think that Giovanna Depp and Wyatt Russell in particular were just there's just a great pair of characters here. I thought you see Wyatt Russell, and it's like Kurt Russell from the 80s, really. That charm, that charisma. It's like,
Yeah, like
it,
that tough edge a little bit.
yeah, but also like you want to get to know the person, and you kind of
Steely
want to,
gaze, but there's a charm,
yeah.
cuddliness there to him. Yeah.
I
I
really
can see it.
enjoy the fact that Wyatt Russell hasn't. I think that him starting his career with a lot of indie cinema. We mentioned he was in, of course, 22 Jump Street, which is probably one of his bigger projects, and then this one I think is a much more of a blockbuster than he's worked on in the past. But I like that he's sort of like proven himself to be an actor.
Mhm.
Instead of like sort of maybe riding on his father's coattails. You definitely just don't get that. You got this like naturally talented actor who's really put himself through the paces. And so at this point, I'm like, all right, this show that he's going to be frontlining, I am really looking forward to it, and I hope that
It's out. I mean,
I
it
haven't
came
seen any episodes
right.
yet. So is it on a streaming service? Do you know?
No,
Or?
it's AMC.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, I know because they had ads for it every time I watched Better Call Saul.
well, that's
It
a
got renewed for a second season, so it seemed
right.
good to you. All right, so
That's the thing. I'm kind of waiting for it to be on like Netflix or something so that I
oh yeah,
can
it'll be on
binge the whole
Netflix at some
thing.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
okay. Did you have anything to add for final thoughts? I mean, that was really my final thoughts.
yeah, I mean, I feel a little bad because I guess the listeners were expecting us to be a little more in depth with our thoughts, and I think we were a little more roundabout, I guess, just because, like you said, I mean, I think the movie does what it sets out to do. I don't necessarily feel disappointed from it, but I do feel a little underwhelmed just because I guess I was expecting a little more from it. Maybe that was my fault. I don't know. Maybe it was the trailer setting me up for something bigger than it ultimately was. But as it stands, I think it's fun. I mean, it's well made. It's a good calling card for everyone involved. I also want to praise. I don't know their names. I believe you said the one actress was French.
Mm-hmm.
What
I
was her
believe
name?
she is. Matilde Olivier.
Yeah, I thought she was very good, and I thought also the main Nazi guy.
Oh
Is he
yeah,
German?
I think it's P.U. Asbeck. I think it's his
Okay,
name.
yeah. I thought they were both very good as well. Especially
Yeah.
what was the guy's name?
I think you pronounce it P.U. Asbeck, but it's
Yeah,
probably completely wrong. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't think it's quite like Christopher Waltz and Inglourious Basterds good, but I think it's a fun snarly villain. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
doing his own thing with it. It's distinct enough.
yeah. So yeah, a fun little exploitation film. Nothing major. Fun. I guess it's technically a B movie, but it's a blockbuster, so a
Mhm.
big B. Yeah. Yeah. I'll
Oh,
give it a B.
a B minus. Okay, I was gonna say, I was like, what's the grade?
Yeah, for a
Uh,
B movie.
yeah, it's funny. We don't disagree. I guess I think that the whole thing is just more polished to me in the sense that I was fully satisfied by this one, and I'm
Yeah.
really glad it exists. It's one of those movies. It kind of goes into my category of films that I realize aren't artistically memorable, but just really just scratch an itch that I think a lot of people are going to have. I heartily recommend this movie to just about everybody. So I'm more of the B plus on this one. I think that it really just it's you said it's well made. I very much agree. I just think it's great to see a competently made genre spanning film that doesn't make stupid mistakes, that doesn't insult your intelligence. It's not too smart for its own good. I see what you're saying. We're like, okay, it definitely doesn't add anything to cinema except for being just a really great example of like what you can do with like material that we've seen before. And for me, that's good enough. I just think it's nice to get a movie like this once in a while, where it's not selling itself too of being like, well, turn your brain off. It's nothing like that. It really is just a wild ride with some really good details to catch along the way and some great performances. And yeah, I was fully sucked into it and glad I checked it out. So it's B plus for me. And I think on Rotten Tomatoes, I think the reviews have been pretty good so far. It's an 81% out of looks like 105 reviews so far as of this recording, and a 77% audience score. So critics and fans seem to be fans, or critics and audience members appear to be fans of this one as well, and it's
Although
worth your time,
it
I think.
seems it's not doing too well at the box office from last I heard.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the numbers,
It's
but
getting
I'm not surprised to hear
swept.
that.
It's getting swept under the rug by the Grinch, which I'll talk about in a bit.
Ah, yes, the Grinch. Yeah, it's in third place. It looks like it's made 10 million so far, and it's under Bohemian Rhapsody, which is still cleaning house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say, I mean, I think the budget for this was about 30 million, maybe 35 million.
Mm.
It was less than 40. So theoretically, I mean, I think they could make, or maybe not make their full budget back, but they could probably break even and do okay. So
Yeah, and hopefully
yeah,
this has legs too, like outside of theaters. I think that streaming royalties. This feels to me like one of those films that's going to have like a strong cult status long after its release.
perhaps, yeah.
All right, well that's Overlord, a B minus, a B, and a B plus from all three of us. So did a nice little range there, but I think that B grade definitely tells you that you're probably going to enjoy this one, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I did. But even if you only enjoy it about as much as Will does, I think it's still worth your time at the theater. So let's get into our mini reviews. Will, why don't you just kick things off with the Grinch? I don't want to wait any longer, honestly.
Cool. Yeah. This is gonna be another one where I don't have terribly a lot to say, but it is the new Illumination entertainment film. As you know, Illumination is the house of the Minions. They made Despicable Me. They made Secret Life of Pets, including its upcoming sequel. And they also quite famously made the first and only film adaptation of The Lorax, which is, in my opinion, The worst adaptation of a Dr. Seuss property ever.
And by a
Uh,
pretty significant margin, I would actually
yeah,
say. Yeah.
but I mean, I think it's fair to say that most, if not all, Dr. Seuss adaptations have been pretty bad,
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
or at least mediocre. And I think that just kind of comes down to the fact that, I mean, they're children's books, and I mean, there's a lot of wealth in them. I think certainly in the drawings and the fun alliterative language and everything. But as they stand, I don't think they're really. I can't really think of a Dr. Seuss book that could warrant a full feature film. I mean, like most of them just kind of stretch out their welcome past the 30-minute mark, and then you just kind of have to add a lot of filler.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's any of these films that really do good filler. A lot of it's just kind of cringy jokes and awkward pop culture references kind of thrown into the mix. And that is no exception with this adaptation of The Grinch.
Well, before you get into that, so what you're saying is the Butter Battle book would not make a good movie?
That could actually work.
You think so? What would you call it? The Butter Battle movie? I can't
Well,
believe it's
no,
not.
I
a
mean, I
butter
think you
battle?
just call it book. Like they made how many Jungle Book movies, and they still just call it book.
Good point.
So why not? Yeah, just call it a movie,
All right,
or just call it book. I don't care.
done.
I don't know. I mean, I do actually think I've talked about this before. I think you could, if you did it well, you could make a feature film like an 80-minute Cat in the Hat that actually adheres pretty well to what Dr. Seuss was going for. I mean, that's not saying that. I'm not saying that because of the podcast I do, but just because I think there's enough in there, enough silliness that you could actually kind of warrant a feature film adaptation of that if you tried. But I just don't think. I mean, you'd probably have to combine that with the Cat in the Hat Comes Back, but maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, The Grinch. It's a movie, and it feels. I think I just wrote in my review for it earlier today, and I described it, I think, as a movie that's designed to be sold in a Sears catalog. And I think
Okay.
that's pretty much. I think it's pretty much how I feel about the film. It feels like it's made to exist more than any creative or mentally stimulating reason. I don't think there's anything that they add to the story that really makes it interesting or unique compared to what Dr. Seuss or the television adaptation did already. But as a feature film, I do think it is better. I say that with an asterisk, I guess, than the 2000 version Ron Howard made with Jim Carrey. Mainly because it's not the ugliest movie in the world, as like that movie is.
Glad someone said it. Yeah.
I mean, the cinematography in that film is terrible.
So you would probably rank it then. The best Grinch is the television special, and then this one, and then
Yes.
the live action.
Yeah, I'd say it's like the TV one, couple bars keep going down. You get
Yeah,
to the
okay.
this one, then keep on moving that elevator down, and then you get to the Jim Carrey one.
All right, the Jim Carrey one is frankly terrifying, but I do that one's though. I feel like I could watch at least half an hour of that and laugh at it before I would get tired and move on.
I don't know. I just find it weird that I mean, I think the Cat in the Hat has several problems, but I just find it weird that everyone is so willing to dismiss the Cat in the Hat, but then like when I bring up like the Grinch, which has I would say all the same problems, everyone's like, oh no, that one's okay. It's like, have you seen it? It's terrible.
not.
Like,
It
it's really
is-
really bad. And I don't know. I mean, I will say compared to that film, this movie isn't quite as like weirdly perverse as that film is, or quite as crass, but it is similarly very commercial. I mean, there aren't any like obnoxious product placements in the film or anything like that. I do think it mostly stays true to the source material more so than the other film adaptation. But I mean, it doesn't really have anything clever or funny to say. Well, there is one gag I quite liked involving Max the dog, but otherwise it's at best amusing. But I found it kind of dull throughout, just how it doesn't really feel like it wants to be more than fine, like just something that kids can watch and parents can fall asleep in, and everyone can see it and spend their money on the merchandise when it comes out by Christmas. And I don't know, it just made me feel very cynical about how movies are made, and that's never quite good for a creative thing like this. So I think that's more of an Illumination problem. I don't know if that's necessarily an issue with the filmmakers who, one of them is Scott Mosier, Kevin Smith's producer / editor. which is a
Yeah, we
very
mentioned
weird
the
thing.
Smodcast just last week, right?
And there's Scott Mosier, and like I cannot emphasize how weird it is that he is involved with a kid film like this. I mean, I know he made that Freebirds movie, I think, as a producer
hmm
a couple years ago, but yeah, it just feels weird that like I've listened to several episodes of Smodcast, and they talk about very graphic sex things, and now he is making probably one of the most successful animated kids films of the next couple years. So that's
Did he
just a
also
weird,
produce Zack and Miri Make a Porno?
probably.
I
I
think
mean,
he
I
was
think
a
that's
producer on that.
I think that was the last thing he did with Kevin Smith. Um, so yeah, I
No,
mean,
he did
that's
something with Kevin Smith after that, but it was like a Jay
what
and
would he have done
Bob
after that?
thing.
Because there was Cop Out, and then did he make the animated thing, the super groovy cartoon movie?
No, there was a Jay and Silent Bob thing that they did in like
Super groovy cartoon
2013.
movie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
the
was
super,
after
yeah,
Zack and
yeah,
Miri. But he
yeah.
didn't produce
I didn't know
that
he was a.
technically. You're right. He voiced a character in that, but I don't think he produced it actually.
Okay, I haven't actually seen that, but I heard it's pretty terrible.
Of course.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, as it stands, the Grinch, I gave it a C. It just kind of bored me in its banality.
Mm.
I think it'll probably appeal fine to general audiences who aren't demanding too much out of it. I think Benedict Cumberbatch is fine as well. I mean, he didn't do a bad job. His performance is a little weird. It sounds like if his version of Smog had like a sinus infection.
So
Uh,
Doctor Strange.
Not quite, but almost. So yeah, I mean, like I guess it. I mean, I did find it amusing that I guess like if he lived up in the mountains, he technically would have like a permanent sinus infection, but I don't know if that's exactly what he was going for. So yeah, it's a film. Like I said, it exists. It does a job, and I felt like it was made to come out during the fourth quarter of Illumination's schedule, and they like kind of calculated it perfectly so that it would make so and so amount of money, and that it would get to this time range. And then I don't know, it just made me more cynical about what Illumination does as a company. And I
Mm.
don't even dislike their movies per se. I mean, besides the Lorax, I feel like most of them are just kind of okay. And
You're a champion of Sing.
I do like Sing, yeah, but that's because the director is one of my favorite people on the planet. So that I'm a little biased in that regard. But
Mm.
yeah, otherwise, I think most of their films are just kind of average or mediocre, and I think that tradition continues with this film.
Okay, I thought they were gonna at least for this add something, and for me the trailers sort of signaled like something that the television special couldn't do and the book couldn't do that this could do because it's more modern animation was maybe just have some energy to it. The visual gags looked kind of funny from the trailers. I thought they were gonna maybe add some like
Yeah,
some interesting
weirdly,
ways of making the Grinch kind of come alive, and I guess that's not the case.
I mean, it's not quite as hyperactive as their other films. I think it's a little more tempered, if that's what you're asking. But I do have one more point to make, and this one is actually something that did kind of offend me on a personal level, and that's the film. I hope this isn't spoiling for anybody, but they kind of roughly imply that the reason the Grinch doesn't like Christmas is because he's seasonally depressed. And
Ooh.
that could be interesting, except that the movie doesn't really do much with that. And I think it's a little insulting to just do that without, introduce that idea without really doing anything with it that's
Yeah.
meaningful and interesting. But I won't get too far into that. I don't really feel like it. But
That's a can of worms right there. Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier. But yeah, that's something else to keep in mind, I guess, if you see
Yeah.
this film. And I wouldn't recommend that, but you'll probably end up seeing it if you have a big family like I do and you watch Grinch films or
That's the
Dr.
plan.
Seuss. Yeah,
That's the plan. I will be seeing it, if not in
your
theaters, with
nieces.
family. I have lots of we know the nieces. The nieces help out with this show.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
they're our producers, right?
that's right. They help me grade everything.
Oh.
But yeah, that C grade you have, it's basically in line with critical consensus. At the moment, The Grinch has a 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, like right in the middle. 5.9 out of 10 average rating, and some positive reviews. Though I was actually surprised to see Alonso Duralde of the Wrap. He liked it. He gave it a positive review and said that the Grinch is, quote, full of warmth and wit. So
I think
it's working for some people.
friend of the podcast, Matt Donato, I think also gave it a fairly
Matt
warm
liked
review.
it, yeah. I wish we could have mentioned Matt's thoughts on Overlord because horror and all of that is
You
absolutely
like the
Matt
film?
Donato's thing. I think I don't want to say yes. I can't remember because I read his tweets about it, but I don't
Probably
want to
did.
say either way. I'm
Actually,
pretty
no.
sure he
Wait.
did.
Oh, wait. Hang on. I think he did actually like it because I saw he's on the IMAX poster.
Oh, huh. Yeah, that's one way
He has
to
a big
confirm
quote.
that. Yeah.
I'll pull it up. Yeah, it was because I was going to the theater recently and I saw a quote. I was like, hey, it's Matt Donato.
Making waves everywhere. I have the IMAX poster up and I don't see any Matt Donato quotes.
Fine, I don't see it either. Oh, here it is.
Oh, wait, found it. This is why
This is
horror fans
why.
go to the
Yeah,
movies.
yeah,
Matt
that's his
Donato.
quote. Yeah,
That's awesome.
good for him.
Congratulations, Matt Donato, friend of the
He did it.
podcast. We miss you. All right. Well, that's the Grinch. Let's talk about Widows. Widows is the latest film from Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen, of course, probably best known. I think his most recent film was 12 Years a Slave, I want to say. Which was
Yeah,
about
well,
5 years ago.
he was like making an HBO show at one point, and then they like pulled the brakes on that during production.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about because he did some short films and then he started getting more into feature-length films. But yeah, he doesn't have any official
No, I
TV
mean like
credits. Yeah, I know what you're saying, but
this
yeah,
is like in between 12 Years a Slave and Widows.
right. It it was Codes of Conduct. The film it was about it was like a BBC show, and I feel like I'm gonna butcher what it was about, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the tradition continues with Widows because it's based on a BBC show
right,
as
yeah,
well.
that's right. A show,
Like
not a
BBC.
movie, and then yeah, we have this. I've never seen Hunger or Shame, his other two
Oh,
films. I've heard
dude, you
they're
gotta check this
fantastic.
out. Yeah, I
I
mean,
know. Need to catch up.
yeah, yeah, Widow. Sorry, no, not Widows. Hunger, I like a good bit, but Shame actually might be my favorite film of his. It's a tough call between that and 12 Years a Slave. But yeah, I mean, Shame was my introduction to him, and I was really impressed with that film. And it was, I believe, the first NC-17 film I ever saw in theaters, which was quite a distinction.
Interesting.
So that was
So
fun.
yeah, because I mean, I guess that came out quite a while ago, and 12 Years a
Uh,
Slave was about 5 years ago, and it is interesting to see like this big gap in his filmography. 12 Years a Slave obviously was a big awards favorite at the Oscars. Widows is a heist film, and it follows the story of a group of women whose husbands were caught up in this heist gone wrong and who lose their lives in the process. And then the fallout of this heist, this death, and the money involved in all of that falls on the widows who have to pay back the men who were robbed, or else they lose everything, their lives, their wealth, everything. So Gillian Flynn also worked on this. This was who probably I think best known for Gone Girl at this point. She's published a bunch of novels. She did Sharp Objects, which was the really great show that came out this past year with Amy Adams. And I think her other novel, Dark Places, was adapted for a TV show at one point, but I'm not
it
as
was a
familiar with it.
movie, I believe, with
It was a
Charlize
movie?
Theron.
Okay. Yeah, I never saw
Did make
it.
a big splash. Yeah.
Regardless, a very talented novelist who she was also, I think, probably known before that for being a TV critic for Entertainment Weekly. So look
That's
out,
correct, yeah.
Will Ashton. You could be next.
Maybe. I wouldn't place your bets on that horse,
We'll
but
see what happens. But yeah, no. So interesting mix. Steve McQueen and Gillian Flynn, two very interesting filmmakers, I guess you'd call Gillian Flynn at this point. Widows stars Viola Davis. It also stars Liam Neeson, Michelle Rodriguez, Elizabeth Debicki, Cynthia Erivo, who we just saw in Bad Times at the El Royale.
yeah.
Colin Farrell, Brian Tyree Henry, Daniel Kaluuya, and Jackie Weaver, Carrie Coon, Robert Duvall. Really packed cast. I mean, the ensemble here is insane. This premiered at Toronto International Film Festival. Reviews have been great. I saw this one last week. I think, did we see it the same night or did you see it a little bit before I did?
I saw it Wednesday. Is that when you saw it?
I think I saw it. Yeah, I did see it Wednesday. So we saw it the same night.
Yeah.
Same night, different states. But okay, Will Ashton, Widows. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, I'm a big fan of Stephen McQueen, not to be confused with the actor, but the filmmaker that has proven himself, I think, quite a few times at this point. As it stands for the film, I think it's probably his weakest of the four that I've seen, but I still liked it quite a bit. It's fun. It's a little pulpier than his other stuff. It's a little more crowd pleasing, I guess. It's a little more broad, I guess, than the sense that he's kind of going for a wider audience. But at the same time, I think kind of similar to how David Fincher approached Gone Girl. I think he is taking something that could have been a little exploitative and maybe verging on trashy, and he turned into something that is deep in commentary, kind of commenting on the state of Chicago and inner politics and the tensions that are found in between like different citizens and different suburban areas and whatnot. And I think it's a pretty compelling film. It's obviously made by a great director, and I think that is shown throughout. I haven't seen the show that it's based on, but I could definitely tell that it was based on a miniseries because I think there's a lot of storylines in here that Steve McQueen, I think, sometimes has a little bit of trouble juggling. I think the main ones are obviously the central heist, and then we have let's see, what's the guy's name from Atlanta, Paperboy?
Brian Tyree Henry.
Yeah, he and Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out and Black Panther. They have a storyline that kind of is interconnected with Colin Farrell and Robert Duvall. That is, I think they're both interesting, but there'll be large chunks of the movie where I think they jump between one story to the other in a way that like they'll focus on the one for like 4 or 5 scenes. It's like, oh, okay, and then they'll like kind of go back to the Viola Davis thing, and that kind of messes with the pacing of the film. And I found that a little bit of a hindrance towards the film, but I think once it kind of gets its mojo working and kind of gets into like the main thrust of the story, I think has great energy. And I mean, obviously, it's Sean Bobbitt is the DP on this again, his regular cinematographer, and I think there are numerous shots in the movie that are so good they sometimes feel like they're like showing off how good they are at filmmaking, which I would be annoyed by if they weren't as good as they were, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's a good film. I think you liked it a little more than I did, though.
I did. I really liked this one. What I liked about this was that it's one of those heist films that is much more grounded and realistic. You know, it doesn't do the sort of splashy Ocean's movie thing, which we just got Ocean's 8, which is interesting to see this one, you know, also a female-led heist group. And the stakes worked for me. The way that they interconnected these characters and the way that you sort of mentioned, and I think Gillian Flynn maybe carries some of that weight for like how everything is balanced. I think ultimately it works really well, if only because I keep going back and forth on this, and some people will call nonsense, but I do think it's kind of on purpose. The way that certain story threads are dropped here, which I think is like really one of the only significant criticisms you can really lob at this, is that, you know, it's big, it's ambitious, and ultimately I think some people will come away from it thinking that maybe their favorite character didn't get their due, or maybe it was very long, but it also felt like it ended before it was over. And that was actually something that I liked, that I liked the sort of lack of resolution for a lot of characters here. Not that there isn't resolution in a lot of certain respects, but sorry, you were going to say.
No, I mean, I think the movie is smart in how it's produced. I think my issue is more with like how it affects the pacing of the film. But as far as the storytelling, I think it's pretty good. My only thing was I felt kind of weird that they didn't really spend too much time with Michelle Rodriguez's character in the scheme of things.
Interesting. I thought that I thought she had got plenty to do, honestly.
I mean, she has stuff to do, but I think comparatively, like her story, her like kind of subplot feels a little lacking compared to Viola Davis and Elizabeth Debicki. Is that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I found that story a little lacking in comparison, but I think she did a pretty good job. I mean, I don't think I agree. I think that it was actually pretty well balanced. I know that they do spend an interesting amount of time with Debicki, but then they also bring in Cynthia Erivo, who plays this character who I found myself really getting fascinated by, in the way that she sort of comes onto the scene, and is certainly a character that when I rewatch this film, I'm going to be paying closer attention to sort of try to get into the head of, like, just to get into her head space. I mean, this is a much more cerebral film than I was expecting. You kind of touched on it, but like the politics of Chicago and all the factors at play was Chicago. Yeah.
It was much more. It was a much more gripping story than I was expecting, and it was also filmed in a way that I thought was kind of remarkable. I think it was a remarkably well told story. I think there are certain scenes in here that are just that are going to be sticking in my head. There's one in particular where the camera is hanging on a certain angle from the car where you don't see the characters talking.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
It's such a great scene that it says so much. With there's a good amount of dialogue, but without really, it's not on the nose. It's not, overtly genre. It does feel like a heist film that's being taken very seriously in a way that we haven't seen in a little while. That I definitely appreciated. Now, this isn't a territory for me. I don't think this is necessarily a must see, although this is another film that I fully recommend to most people. I just think that you're going to get, I think for the most part, people are going to really get a kick out of this one, and they're going to enjoy it's just a really well told story here. I think that this is one of a heist that you won't exactly see coming in certain ways, and it doesn't do the typical heist things, but it knows that stuff is there. This is Steve McQueen has obviously seen a heist movie before, and he's sort of playing with your expectations for what that can mean. It's reminded me a little bit of American Animals, which kind of did something kind of similar with one of the best scenes in that movie, if not the best scene, that I appreciate here as well. But I have to give this one a little bit of knocking down, if only because I'm still grappling with to what you said. I mean, I do think there's something to be said about the way some characters are given more to do than others. It wasn't necessarily something that held me back from Michelle Rodriguez in particular. For me, it was a little bit more Brian Tyree Henry. There was something about his character that I felt like was missing, something that really was going to make him click, because the performance was there. The performance was great. And he's complimented really well by Daniel Kaluuya. He plays this like just really devilish character. That was you can tell that this actor is just really loving what he gets to do in this movie.
I think he maybe steals the movie. It's hard to tell, but he definitely makes the most of it for sure.
The stares that he does, the way that he just is blocked in all of his scenes. It's something to watch. I mean, there's a one take with a beatbox scene in particular that's like what's going to happen, but it still kind of takes your breath away. And
for sure,
I dug it quite a lot. So I really liked Widows. I gave it a B+, and I hope people check this one out. I won't be surprised if it gets some Oscar attention, honestly.
Yeah, certainly with Steve McQueen, it's a possibility. I'm curious to see how it holds up. I don't know if it'll get any award attention in particular.
If only because there's a lot of competition, honestly. If this had come out last year, you better believe this would have gotten, quite a bit.
I think to Steve McQueen's credit, I think he, I know he had good intentions or strong intentions with the film, but I think he was using this, I think, as a chance to make a property that he loves a lot and he grew up with, and he wanted to have some fun, I guess. I mean, which is certainly understandable given how serious his last film was. So, I enjoyed the film. I guess I had some reservations about it, but and I also I don't know quite where I land on Colin Farrell's performance. It felt like more of an accent than a performance to me, but I don't know where I stand on that. But I thought, like we said, a lot of performances are standouts here. I also want to celebrate Elizabeth Debicki, who I thought was great, and I think this was a great showcase for her.
Really,
I think she's been in a lot of stuff recently. I think she was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, right? And the Night. What was that thing with Tom Hiddleston?
Oh gosh, I know what you're talking about. Because in Guardians of the Galaxy, she was like the gold character, right? I don't want to. She was. Let's see. So, Man from U.N.C.L.E. 2015.
That's right.
And then no, that's not what you're talking about, is it?
No. But I meant like you're right that she was in that.
Sorry. She was in. She voiced a character in Valerian. I don't know if I remember a film called The Night.
No, it was.
Was it a TV show?
It was a miniseries.
Oh, was it that? It's that miniseries the Tom Hiddleston, Night Manager.
Nightman, that's it. Yeah,
yeah, that's right. That's the one that everyone's been telling me I need to see, the miniseries.
Yeah, she was very good in that. I only saw a couple episodes, but she definitely stands out in that, and I think this is a great showcase for her as well. So I'm very excited to see where she goes. And I like the film. Like I said, I think it didn't reach the same heights as Steve McQueen's other films, but it's certainly a good film to watch, and I hope people check it out when they get a chance to see it. There was something else I was going to say, but I'm forgetting what.
Well, okay. I had one last thing to say about Elizabeth Debicki. She was in a lot of movies this year. She
that's
was in
true.
Cloverfield Paradox.
Mhm.
She voiced the Peter Rabbit character.
Oh
But
yeah.
one movie that not enough people have seen that I think they should go check out that she's in is The Tale. She has kind of a
Oh really? She's in
haunting
that?
performance in that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the movie that's actually reminded me of a good bit was Killing Them Softly with Brad Pitt. Especially in the way that that film explores crime in the city. And yeah, that was a movie that's reminded me of a good bit. So that's what I was going to say earlier.
What was your grade for Widows
Oh
then?
yeah, I gave it a B.
All right. So B plus, definitely a good recommend from us. Okay, we just have a couple things left. Real quick, I want to talk about Outlaw King. Outlaw King is a historical action drama about Robert the Bruce.
I've heard a lot about one thing in particular about this film.
What is that?
The peen.
Oh, that's right. You do see Chris
I don't
Pine's
want to. I don't
peen.
want. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to denigrate this film to just that because I think that's actually kind of shameless. But I say that because like for some reason like no one's really talked about like the quality of the film. All I heard about was that they cut out 20 minutes and that everyone just keeps bringing up Michael or what's his name, Chris
Chris
Pine's
Pine's, yeah.
penis. So
Which I think it's worth bringing up just because this is a film that, there are not enough films. My thing is, if you're going to show frontal nudity for women all the time, it is kind of strange that Hollywood is like, well, you can't do that for men. Now, of course, if it offends your sensibilities either way, I think that's one thing. All I'm saying is
I think we've opened up in the past like 10 years as
we
far
have,
as
yeah, we've
male
there's-
nudity. I mean, since Forgetting Sarah Marshall, I think it's kind of been
right.
getting into the mainstream.
But I think we don't need to get into this. So
Yeah, I was gonna say,
let's have to start digging through the. Anyway,
let's
so
cut this
Robert the
cord before we
Bruce. Robert the Bruce, probably best known to people from Braveheart. He's a real historical person who was involved in the Scottish War for Independence during the 12th century. I want to say it was it was like the late 1200s, early 1300s. Robert the Bruce, he was the son of the Robert the Bruce that is in the Braveheart film. Now, Braveheart, the Mel Gibson film, I don't like the movie Braveheart. I know it has its fans, I guess. It's never clicked for me. I've just never thought it really works as a film, and I hate how historically inaccurate it is. I just think it's offensive in how historically inaccurate it is. Like, I'm not somebody who's a purist of like, I don't think that everything has to be like every little detail has to be considered as like, oh, they wouldn't have those bricks in the 1400s or something like that. It's like, no, I don't go that far, but it's like things where you have like Mel Gibson's character wearing face paint and a kilt and like certain battles being completely wrong and like all of this stuff about characters betraying each other and dying in certain ways. It's like, it's ridiculous. Braveheart, I think, is just a weird mythical telling of a period in time that's exciting enough on its own. And I've long said this, Will Ashton. I've long said that you can do the Scottish War for Independence and all this, a story that is really fascinating, and you can do it by being historically accurate to a
You say
pretty
this to
specific
us
degree.
all the time.
I say it. I guess I haven't complained about
No.
Braveheart to you specifically, but I have complained about Braveheart quite a bit in my time. And I gotta say, Outlaw King is the movie that I've been waiting for in this respect. It's not an amazing film by any stretch, but as a Netflix war film, oh, you could do way worse. And I actually think this one is perfectly acceptable for a night to stay in, sit back, and enjoy Chris Pine trying to do a Scottish accent and getting it right some of the time. And that's not really why you watch this movie. You watch this movie because it is actually an interesting story that there is something to like what the Scots were trying to do. And maybe I should give a little bit more background. So Scotland at this time was under the fealty of the English army, under King, I think it was King Robert at this point, or sorry, Edward. Sorry. Robert is the main character. So Edward the First, he gets the Scottish to surrender because William Wallace has lost a battle at Falkirk. He's gone into hiding. And then Robert Bruce and John Comyn basically have to they're the last of the Scottish nobles who kind of have to go back to Scotland and pay their taxes and do whatever England says. Over a series of events, Robert Bruce, who is played by Chris Pine, reignites a revolution after William Wallace dies. And with the help of Aaron Taylor Johnson, who plays the Black Douglas in this, interesting historical character that they actually brought to life in some interesting ways. And Florence Pugh plays his wife, wonderful actress. Remember her from Lady Macbeth. I've been waiting to see kind of another period drama for her, and this one's more of a war film, obviously. She plays his second wife. His first wife died. And later on, King Edward actually sets up like a marriage to sort of solidify the houses. And so you have this interesting romance between Robert the Bruce, a Scottish guy who's named King, and Florence Pugh, who has a loyalty to England. And you kind of see like, okay, is she going to follow him? Is she going to kind of get caught up in this revolution? Or is she going to have divided loyalties? And you quickly see where that goes. But nevertheless, it is an interesting dynamic between these two characters who are kind of like, attracted to each other, but also very wary of each other and trying to figure each other out. And the romance here between these two characters is one of the most interesting things about it. And honestly, a lot of the great stuff in this movie is the interplay between the characters, because it's not dialogue heavy, but there are just a lot of really specific moments where you have to buy, like, the only way that you get entertained by this movie is that you have to buy the camaraderie, the men who are loyal to Robert the Bruce in a way that kind of defies logic, because there are really low points in this film where you're wondering to yourself, why are the Scottish doing this? Like, why are they so bent on fighting this hard for their independence when it seems so bleak? And if you know your history, you know why. And if there are some faults with this movie, it's that they don't do quite enough to really get it across, like, how terribly the Scottish were mistreated by the English, and what they were specifically doing to make them feel like they had no choice but to rebel and have their own lands because of what England was doing at this point. And like, some of that history gets a little bit glossed over and spoken in exposition, and you kind of wonder, like, because it's from the perspective of Chris Pine's character and these other characters, you wonder to yourself, like, okay, why are they really doing this? Is it just pride? And if so, does that make this a likable character? And so on and so on. I think that the movie, though, through Aaron Taylor Johnson, interestingly, does actually give you a good idea of like why they fight so hard. It's because they're taking their lands, and like through him, you kind of see it. You see the anger, you see the resentment, and like why he's so willing to risk everything to fight for freedom, as Mel Gibson would shout to his untimely demise in a certain movie I won't mention for spoiling it. But that said, Outlaw King, it's a surprisingly better than you might expect Netflix action movie. And I say that with no caveats. I think that most people who watch this are going to have a good time with it and learn some history. There's some great historical accuracies. They stick to the script, honestly, with like a lot of stuff that actually happened. Obviously, lots of creative liberties, lots of things that are kind of like moved around and played with, but nothing that's like offensive or betrays the spirit of this point in time. So if you like your historical action movies, this is a really good one. This one's like one of the better ones that's come out in recent memory. So I would definitely check it out. It's a big budget film and it looks totally like it. It's $120 million to make.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It premiered at Toronto International Film Festival. And I definitely recommend. It was co-written and directed by David Mackenzie, by the way.
I heard that.
Yeah. Perfect Sense, Startup. One of my favorite movies of 2016, Hell or High Water. Hell or High Water, better film than this one by a bit of a stretch, but this is a pretty decent follow-up and definitely a splashy follow-up for this director, who definitely, by my eyes, can really make a pretty compelling blockbuster that's better than it has any right to be, honestly. So that's Outlaw King. It is on Netflix right now. Will, do you have any interest in this one?
I do. Yeah, I don't think it's on the top of my movies to watch on Netflix right now, because there are quite a few things I want to catch up on, including The Other Side of the Wind, the new, well, I don't know if it's new per se, but the recently released Orson Welles final picture that they have on the collection that's pretty high up on my to-watch list. I also want to get to Haunting of Hill House and that Adam Sandler Netflix special that everyone tells me is surprisingly really good. So it's on there. I do want to check it out, though.
All right. Well, that was Outlaw King, and obviously your options are plentiful with Netflix films at the moment. But Will Ashton, you have another film that you saw, The Front Runner. This was one of the films on my list of films that I want to see this fall. Should it stay there? Is this one worth checking out?
Yeah. So this is the new Jason Reitman film. If you don't know, Jason Reitman is the guy. Is he still best known for Juno? Um,
Juno, Young
I mean,
Adults,
yeah.
Tully.
hmm
They're all sort of, yeah, like.
Yeah. Yeah, Telly, we talked about that for a main episode
Hmm.
in spring.
I think
And
Juno
I
is
mean,
probably his most popular film. Maybe Up in
sure.
the Air is kind of
I was gonna
close.
say Up in the Air for me is I think his best
Same.
film, but yeah, I mean he's certainly I would say with the exception of maybe one or two film well yeah two films, Men, Women, and Children and Labor Day. I would say most of his films have been fairly successful in one regard or another. And did we talk about Thank You for Smoking, his first film?
Not in detail, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I that's quite good. That's probably his second best in my view. Yeah, so this one is it's based on a true story. I'm forgetting the guy's name,
Gary Hart.
but Gary Hart. There you go. I don't know why I forgot that, but played by Hugh Jackman. He in the I think it was in the '80s, I believe, right, mid '80s.
1988. Yeah, it was the
Oh, late '80s. Okay,
it
yeah.
was, yeah, because it was the presidential campaign. It was after Nixon, or sorry, Nixon. Wow, it was after Ronald Reagan's 8 years of the '80s, and then yeah, it was Gary Hart was the lead Democratic presidential
Right.
candidate
Yeah, which is
until he
where the
wasn't.
title comes from.
Right.
Yeah, I mean he was well on his way to earning the Democratic ticket, and as the film expresses, like in a matter of I think 3 weeks, everything comes crashing for him due to a cheating scandal that gets quite salacious and scandalous, and it kind of set the way for how I guess, especially nowadays, the line between politicians and their personal life is kind of blurred. You know, like when you become, or not even politician, just when you become a public figure, like you just like everything's kind of up for grabs more or less, and the film kind of talks about whether that's okay or if that's appropriate or not. And I don't think it necessarily weighs one side or the other, though it definitely leans on one side. But I'll let you explore that when you see the film, John.
Right.
Yeah, it's definitely an ensemble. It's kind of Robert Altman-esque in the way of its approach. There's like a single take opening shot here that's definitely a nod to his type of films, and I liked it. It reminded me of a good bit of like the movie No. Do you remember that? The director of Jackie, his film before that. Just in the way that it uses kind of intimate shaky cam approach that he kind of or Jason Reitman started to pick up, I think, from Casual, his work on that the Hulu show we've talked about more than once on this program.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
it's interesting you bring it up because that doesn't No take place in 1988.
I think so.
That's
Yeah,
Pablo Larraín's film, right?
yeah. It's a really good film if you get a chance to check it out. I think I've brought it on the show more than once, but yeah, I think it definitely kind of has that kind of look and feel and intensity to it, especially as the film follows the dissection of Gary Hart's political and personal life. And as a film, I think it has a lot to say. It doesn't really say anything subtly, and I don't think it says everything as well as it could, but I think the performances are very strong. I think Hugh Jackman, as per usual, is very good here. There are a lot of stand-up performances from Vera Farmiga, J.K. Simmons. I'm trying to remember who else is in this film. There's like a million people. I remember Bill Burr was in it. Let's see. What's his name from Girls? Alex. Blanking on that. Oh well.
You talking about
Yeah.
Adam Driver?
No, not Driver.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. He
Like,
plays oh, yes. Yeah, see, I'm not gonna remember his name, but he does play that character in Girls who's like friends with Adam Driver, I guess, kind of almost.
yeah.
He's like, I don't even know how to like describe the guy, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a stacked cast. I mean, everyone and their brother signed up for this film. It feels
Hmm.
like, and it handles most things pretty well. I mean, there's a lot of story here, and it can feel a little chaotic, but at the same time, that's kind of the point of the film, especially in how it portrays the media and how a lot of lines obviously get blurred and a lot of things kind of get tossed in the air. As it stands as a film, I don't think it really. I mean, it's definitely going for a lot of things that are being talked about now. I don't think I need to elaborate too more into that, but it's definitely trying to put its finger on the pulse of modern politics and just general media discussions that are going on right now. And like I said, it's not very subtle about what it's doing or how it's trying to connect to today. But as a film, it's solid. It's I don't think it's the best picture nominee that people were hoping it was going to be. I don't think it's going to be like this major shakeup for the award season that a lot
It's
of
not a
people.
front runner for Best Picture.
Yeah, I didn't want to use that pun, but I was walking around it. But you just you nipped that in the bud.
I was waiting for you, and you just didn't go
Yeah,
for it. So
I was trying to go around it, but sometimes you just gotta check that tree. I guess.
I
But
didn't have the heart to let you get away with that.
sure. As it stands, yeah, I don't have a ton to say about the film because it didn't like blow me over, but it's solid. I think I gave it a B. It does its job fairly well, but I don't think it's going to be one that is going to end up on my end of the year list at all. So,
Well, actually, you know I love political movies, so
I think you like it.
I'm gonna check it out. And I'm fairly interested in the Gary Hart story in particular because it's funny because right before this movie came out, new information came out about that whole scandal. Now I haven't seen the movie. I don't know how it portrays what went down here, but there's something involved where like the media gets their hands on what looks like, puts Gary Hart in a situation that looks like that he cheated on his wife. And that one of the guys who arranged for that, it was actually a scandal manufactured to sink his campaign. And basically one of the perpetrators of it finally admitted to it after a couple of decades. So I definitely recommend listeners check that out if they're interested. It's
yeah, I had no idea about that at all.
It's something that the movie was already done, but it's pretty clear. Like once you hear the story of like what they did, like why it's so ambiguous and why Gary Hart to this day was like, I still don't understand what happened. Because they basically like took a picture and did all this stuff, and I don't want to give anything away, but they sort of did it in a very like hapdash way to make him look bad. And yeah, it was crazy because I was like, thinking about checking out the movie, and then I heard about the story, and I was like, oh man, now it seems like this movie is going to just make me angry. Because Gary Hart, he probably would have been president if this hadn't have happened, because he left the race in 1987, and then he tried to come back, and then just the American public completely turned against him. And he's been a politician since. Like he's still married to his wife, and he's been, in politics. He never went away really, but this is an interesting chapter in political history, American political history, that people will find entertaining because it's amazing how the course of history changes so dramatically by events like this or things like this that really, as we're finding out, like had no real basis. Like there was no real reason for him not to be president because he probably would have won that election against the incumbent vice president, honestly.
But no, I do think it's interesting because I was talking to some critics after the film, after the screening I saw, and they were talking about the photo, and they were saying that was such a big thing and that it was very strange that they don't show the photo in the film. And I was like, now you're talking about that, I was like, yeah, I mean, if that was like the big thing, why don't they show it in the film? And I'm wondering, when that information come to light that you're talking about?
It was right before Halloween, so it was like mid-October.
So I was gonna say I was wondering if they edited it out, but I mean I saw the film pretty well before that.
No, I think it was already.
So it's interesting. I don't quite know why they chose not to show that photo in the film. I guess maybe for the purposes of leaving things a little more vague. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a kind of strange film in that regard. But we'll talk about more when you see it, I guess.
Sounds good. All right, well, that's the front runner. It didn't really make any money. Like it made looks like $76,000 total.
Yeah, I think it came out on election day in limited release.
Yeah,
it's a rare film that come out like on a Tuesday. It didn't. And I guess I don't know. I mean, I guess in theory it makes sense why they would release a movie then, but I don't think anyone was like, let me avoid politics by watching more politics.
Right. Yeah. The escapism wasn't lost on people there. Yeah. Hollywood has this weird thing of like releasing election movies at interesting times, like a swing vote and like all kinds of things along the way. Anyway, This film has about a 62% on Rotten Tomatoes, so pretty mixed with critics as well, but skewing positive, so it sounds about where you're at. Although it seems like you like it a little bit more than a 62% might track to, I guess, for some
I mean, I
people.
was between like a B and a B minus. I think I skewed a little more towards. I don't know. I've been back and forth between the grade. Truth
We'll
be
ask
told.
you again next week, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, that's The Front Runner. I want to check it out, and I'll let you know what I think of it.
Yeah, because it was going to be. It was
yeah.
almost on your top 3 for the fall.
Yeah, I really was like looking forward to it, and now I'm just sort of dreading seeing it, but I'll definitely catch it when I can.
I mean, I think you'll like it. It's entertaining at least.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that'll do it for mini reviews this week. Let's close out the show with what's coming out next week. Our featured review is going to be Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. Looking forward to that new Warner Brothers film, the sequel to Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'm going to say, well, I rewatched Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. You're not going to believe this. Yeah, I watched it.
You didn't like it.
You're not going to believe this. I watched it, and I hate it just as much as the first time I saw it. So,
yeah.
yay.
If you want a little back behind the scenes story, dear listeners. So when John and I were getting to know each other, we were on pretty we were friendly. We were getting to know each other and talking more. And when he saw Fantastic Beasts, when I saw Fantastic Beasts, I was like, you asked me how I thought about the film. I was like, yeah, it was all right. I didn't have any strong feelings, as I'm prone to say on the show, but I was like, it's okay. It's not as good as the other ones, but it does its job. And you're like, okay, cool. I look forward to seeing it on Thursday. And then late Thursday night, because we have a couple hours of difference, I wake up in the middle of the night, like see my phone's like going ablaze, and I look, and you're like yelling profanities and saying several things at me in this film, and I was like, oh, I guess it's a new chapter in our lives right here.
That's right, and that's when Will and I became friends.
Yeah, and that's when John Negroni became president.
Yeah, that's when he became the president. Other than that, we have Instant Family. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this movie is actually happening. Sean Anders' film. And then we have Widows, which is hitting a wider release. So we'll be covering. I think one of us might actually catch Instant Family. I have interest in it for reasons that are specific to the films by Sean Anders, honestly. And I rewatched She's Out of My League recently, and I forgot that movie takes place in Pittsburgh. Yeah, so I was like, Will Ashton, Internet, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, it was shot here. I mean, I saw it a while ago. My friend's in the movie. She was an extra.
Nice.
Tracy. Yeah, I haven't seen that since it came out, and I don't really plan to, but yeah.
I don't have a reason to prioritize it, but I'm actually kind of glad I checked it out, to be totally honest. Like, it was just a nice little, like, it's one of those comedies that I don't think is very funny, but it's kind of like comfort food, and it's interesting how badly it's aged in the last decade, but I got a kick out of it, honestly. It's on Netflix.
I'll have to ask you more questions about that away from the podcast. What do you mean by that?
Yes, we'll talk about it. And then last up, we have The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which is going to start streaming on Netflix, but it's also hitting a limited release. You might be able to catch it in theaters. This is the new Coen Brothers film that might be worth your time. And it's an anthology with like 6 different stories, and I'm hearing great things. What about you, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it's actually playing in theaters right now in select markets.
Yeah, it's playing in San Francisco at the moment, but I think it's going to hit some more theaters this next week as well, yeah.
Probably, I hope so. I mean, I hope it comes here. I know it's playing in your neck of the woods right now, and I would love to see this on the big screen, but I don't think I'm going to have the opportunity. But I definitely am 100% planning to check out this film, because every Coen film is a must for me, and this is certainly a must as well.
Right on. All right, well, that'll do it for us this week. Thank you, as always, for listening. If you like our show, don't forget to review and rate us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google, all that stuff you love. Our social media platforms are in the show notes. You can find our Facebook, Twitter, everything there. You can also email us anytime, cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter. If you want to hang out with Maverick and myself and Will Ashton, you can find all of that in the show notes again. And see you next week to talk some Harry Potter. It's been a couple of years. Looking forward to it. From the Internet California, I'm John Negroni.
And from the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
For Maverick Hines from the Broadband Basement, we'll see you next time.